like a lower third, and they were like, no, this is private stuff.
210 shows, and that's the only time we did that. And now we know why. Yeah. Anyway, an interesting thing this week, because I've been visiting a lot of people in their home studios here across the valley.
You live in the studio zone.
I live in the studio zone, just next to Studio City, where there are lots of studios. And I'm finding that a lot of people may be a little bit behind in the technology. Obviously, a lot of people still using external preamps because they said some engineer told me to put it in. Or my audio guy, I paid him a lot of money and he said, here, you need one of these.
Or the guy at Sweetwater said, I need this piece of equipment.
That's right. Never go into Sweetwater or any of the retail stores not knowing what you want. Know what you want when you walk in there. Anyway, one of the most interesting things I'm finding is a lot of people they use processing a lot. And I'm finding that most of them have no idea why.
Right.
Well, they know why they use it, but they don't necessarily know how to use it.
Yeah.
A lot of people have stacks, but if, say, you set a stack for them in Twisted Wave, or I set a stack for them in Twisted Wave.
Let me just explain real quick
what a stack is. Right? Define a stack.
Yeah, so a stack is a terminology lifted from Twisted Wave, and now we're kind of making it a general term for any processing we do in post. But it's the ability to create a preset that has multiple different processing steps that is loaded as a recall, and you just click it and
one
boom,
click
it's
and,
done.
And it does it.
Yeah,
right.
That's a stack.
Right. But we've been doing that for a number of years. You've been doing it for a number of years. Yeah. If somebody moves their studio, say they're in one closet and they buy a whisper room, or they're in a whisper room and they get rid of their whisper room and they go back in the closet.
Yeah.
That stack is now null and void, isn't
Pretty
it?
much, yeah. Yeah.
But, and that's what I've been running into. People have been moving their studios, and they said, well, George set this stack. And I'm like, well, you're not where you were.
The big difference is the bass response a lot of times.
Oh, yeah.
Bass response and noise floor.
Right.
Like you'll go from a quiet space to a noisy space or back the other way. And but the bass response is, if you start in a really small space, they're very boomy.
Right.
So you have to process the heck out of that low end to get it out of there. Right. Then you go into a nice big open room or an open space, and it sounds very thin.
Right, exactly.
And vice versa. If it starts thin and you go into the closet, it can get really super boomy.
Right. So when someone asks you for a stack, and I don't want you to give away any of your trade secrets on this sort of thing.
Well,
what do you do when they say, I want this to sound great?
Well,
what do you tell them?
This is super subjective, right?
Of course.
I mean, you're basically trusting your sound to my ears and my experience, and as to what I think the person that's hiring you might want to hear. So there's a lot of, again, it's a very subjective
because
thing.
You don't hire you.
Right. And so I tried to get in the mind of the person that would be hiring you on that kind of a read. So the stacks are kind of specific to a genre.
Right.
Like I wouldn't use the same stack on an audiobook as I would use on a commercial, for example.
Right.
Be pretty different.
Right.
Now, if you can't justify, if you're just getting started and you're like, I just need something, I will make a stack that's very middle of the road. It doesn't have a lot of anything, tons of EQ or anything. I'll just do a really, just to raise up the overall average level a little bit, maybe filter out the low end rumble and junk in the recording, and that's about it. That'd be a basic one.
Right. But it's always best to make everything, all the acoustical stuff, it's mostly physical stuff that you can deal with physically before you ever hit record.
Yeah, I can't fix a lot of acoustical problems.
Right.
But the only thing you can fix with a little bit of EQ is, again, if it's boomy or muddy. And when I say boomy, it's like when you talk, it just sounds like a subwoofer in your room. It's just boomy. And then I can you can compensate that
a little bit,
for a little bit. But other than that, if it's too live or reverberant or reflective or diffuse or hollow or any of that stuff, you got to fix that up front. Can't fix it in post.
Yeah. I'm finding that now I'm keeping things very, very simple. That's always been my philosophy.
Sure.
And usually if I'm going into somebody's studio and they're like, I need to set this so it sounds great, I'm like, well, get your levels right. Let's adjust the acoustics. Okay, there's a slight, maybe a little bit of bass reflex in here.
Or bounce off the copy stand.
Or bounce off, right. Those sorts of things.
You have your mic on a desk and it's bouncing off the desk.
That's when I say, here's a new mic stand, get it off the desk. It's amazing how bad that can make your audio sound. It's always
Yeah.
good to have your mic stand on the floor. Very important. But usually it's just some very minor EQ, just maybe rolling off the low end a little bit.
Sometimes a little sibilance adjustment.
Just
like
just a little bit.
If you're on a Rode NT1A.
Right. You know,
Which is like, how many times have you heard a Rode NT1A? I mean, 100, 200?
Yeah.
Hundreds of times. That has got to be the most popular voiceover mic ever for the beginner voice actor.
Yeah. A lot of people buying the VO1As.
I mean, I hear these, man, but those Rode NT1As.
Yeah.
And they're so sibilant. They're so bright.
Yeah, they
so I'm always like adjusting that.
Just that little tiny bit there. And those are the adjustments you make. Processing, again, is not to make you sound fantastic. It's to adjust for the room to allow you to sound as natural as possible.
Yeah.
Going back to what Rick was saying, Rick Lance was saying about the announcer voice. If you have a naturally great sounding voice, that's what you want it to come out as. You don't want to enhance it. You don't want to take away from it. You want to capture it and have it reproduced as you exist.
Yeah. And if you happen to be doing a promo, a promo read where you're going for a really specific style,
right?
There is certain kinds of processing that might be used on promo. It might be a little bit more compressed. There are certain things that are going to be new. If you're doing something for radio,
right,
then it's going to be processed like crazy when it goes out on the air. So then for that, I would lay it on a lot more thick.
Right.
It's going to be way more in your face.
Right. But how many people actually do that?
It's not too many. Not when you're getting started. When you're getting started, you're rarely going to be doing radio imaging or radio spots. You're mostly going to be doing auditioning for commercials and doing e-learning and that kind of stuff.
That's right.
Then it's just about clarity at the end of the day. Clarity, the processing. I'll leave with this. I don't know if you have anything else to say, but I'll leave with this. But the processing should be unnoticed. I mean, you should never draw attention to itself, like unless it's being listened to by a trained engineer who knows exactly what he or she is hearing. It should not be something that's noticed at all by the end user. No one should ever go, "Whoa, that sounds really something or other." If they do, something's probably out of whack.
You've overdone it.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll set stacks for you. Don't do it yourself unless you know what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with experimenting.
No,
but if you're going to experiment, bounce it off somebody you trust. Let somebody get somebody else's impression about the sound.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, Adam Harrington has made his way all the way from Las Vegas, coming down 15 onto the 210 and making his way here into the valley.
Boy, are my arms tired.
Yeah. Your feet are really tired, too. Do the old Fred Flintstone thing. Anyway, we'll be talking to him in just a minute. And so don't go away. We'll be right back after this message.